Hey guys, Chris Potter here, and today I'm going to be doing a little talk and demonstration on how to properly assign healing cooldowns. It's something that I get asked about a lot, and I think it's something that those who do know it may seem obvious to, but those who aren't that experienced and maybe they're kind of new to Mythic progress rating, this can be really helpful. They can learn a lot about assigning cooldowns and how cooldowns work exactly. So, hope you guys enjoy this video. Let's get into it. Okay, so before we can assign cooldowns, we really need to understand how these cooldowns work. So obviously for most of us at the top end, we obviously are very familiar with these cooldowns and it may seem a bit obvious, but there may be some raid leaders out there who haven't healed, who aren't completely familiar with all the spells, so I'll quickly go through them because it is important to understand the benefits, the good times and the bad times to each spell before you assign them, obviously. So first of all, one set of cooldowns are healing throughput cooldowns, okay? So that's things like Avenging Wrath. A 130-ish CD with Vision. Obviously we have Vision of Perfection nowadays, so it's important to take that into consideration, and usually Paladins will be playing with Vision Major, so 130 cooldown. If they're for some reason not playing it, it's 2 minutes. Wings are a very high throughput, over 30 seconds. 25 seconds if you don't have the trait. Movement is not a problem at all. You can get the full use out of Wings while running around. The raid being stacked does make it better, but it's not mandatory. You don't need to be stacked to make the good use of Wings. I did say that movement is not a problem, but it does require that the Paladin is able to melee something while Wings is up. So running is not a problem as long as you're running around something you can hit. You know, you could run in circles all day with Wings up and do good healing. You just don't want to run out of melee range. Evangelism, also 1 minute 30 cooldown. But this obviously doesn't need a vision or anything. Vision doesn't affect it. It's just baseline 1 minute 30. Really high throughput after you press Avenge and you go Schism, Penance, tac. 15-20 seconds of really good throughput. It obviously does require the good ramp before, and it does need low or no movement to get the most out of this for the full throughput. There is no benefit to being stacked, so it's completely fine to use if the raid is spread, as long as they're, in range of the healer. Completely fine, you're going to get the most out of this. And the throughput is kind of dependent on what else you use with it, so most importantly, Shadow Fiend is the 3 minute cooldown. That means every second evangelism, you're going to get the biggest pump from it. Healing Tide Totem, 2 minutes 15-ish CD with Vision and 3 minutes without. By the way, the reason why I've put ish is because the cooldown obviously depends on your neck level. So that's why I've put ish. It can be higher or lower depending on neck levels. But that's kind of a way, that's a good benchmark to take it up. Anyway, Healing Tide Totem, high throughput over the 10 seconds it's up. Because of Shaman Mastery, this is a really good cooldown to use when people's health is low. It also scales well with haste. So, if you have Bloodlust up, it's a really good one. But there are obviously other good cooldowns that scale with haste, like Wings and Evangelism. Movement is not a problem at all. Obviously, it's a one button press. Press the button, done. And there's no need to be stacked to get the most out of this. Your raid can be completely spread as long as they're in range of the healer. Perfectly fine to use. Tranquility, 3 minute cooldown baseline. These are where it gets a bit messy. If you just use Vision, it's 2 minutes 15-ish. If you use Inner Peace, it's 2 minutes. If you use Inner Peace and Vision, you can actually get it to 1 minute 30-ish. But generally, most people will just play this as a 3 minute cooldown. But it's good to know your options, If you want to change the cooldown around to fit in better, you can use those things there. But generally, the best throughput is for them to play 3 minute and not have to use Inner Peace and not have to use Vision as a essence. Tranquility is a high throughput that has a lasting effect over 10 to 15 seconds. Even though the initial cast is not that long, it changes depending on haste. It can be anywhere between like 4 and 6 seconds, I think. It does apply a hot on the plays that it heals, which stacks up and stays over time. And that healing is not only directly the hot from Tranquility is also giving the Druid mastery, increasing their healing even more. So don't think of Tranquility as this burst, 6 second healing, and it stops. It does do most of it in that first channel, but afterwards it does have a lasting effect. So it's good that it can cover 10 to 15 seconds. It's a good cooldown. Problem is, you must be stationary. This is not Legion anymore. You can't move around while casting Trank. You need to stand still and cast it. The raid being stacked can increase the throughput of it by Spring Blossoms, Efflorescence, increasing the healing from the Trank, but it's not a massive deal. If people are spread, Trank is still going to be good. Revival, 3 minute cooldown, 2 minutes 15-ish CD with Vision. There's also a trait, Uplifting Spirits, that is often used. So with Vision and Uplifting Spirits, you can get it to about 2 minute cooldown. It's an instant heal. Everyone knows Revival, I think, but it's not a very strong heal. It's an instant heal. It's okay, but it's not going to give you the same healing as any of the other cooldowns. Movement is obviously no problem. You can run around, jump around, do whatever you want and press revival. And being stacked or being spread makes absolutely no difference. So it's good that it's an instant heal. Movement doesn't matter. No stacking requirement. But it is a very weak heal compared to the other heals. So no surprise. I mean, if you just, after I've read all these cooldowns out, maybe you can see just from seeing these cooldowns why the healer meta is as it is. And it's basically not taking monks and rarely taking druids. But anyway, Divine Hymn, 3-minute cooldown, 2-minute 15-ish CD with vision, really high throughput that has a lasting effect of over around 15 seconds because of mastery, because of the healing increase buff that it gives. So it's not, again, like with Trank, it's not just that healing while it's channeling, it has a lasting effect for a little while afterwards. Must remain stationary just like Trank, and there's no stacking requirement at all. So Divine Hymn very similar to Trank, you can kind of look at them as interchangeable when assigning cooldowns in my opinion. Last cooldown, Holy Word Salvation, 12-minute cooldown, ends up being between 4 to 7 minutes. Realistically, it does vary a lot though, depending on how you play. If you're really trying to get it down, you can get it a bit lower, and if you're really lazy with it or the fight is designed in some way, it can be longer. But I would say maybe like 5 minutes cooldown is your average, maybe like 5:30 cooldown. It really does depend. It's hard to really put a number on it. So generally, you're only going to get one use of this in a fight, unless it's a really long fight. And if it's a really long fight, then you want to assign this very early, so you get another one at the end, because it is quite longer than a normal 3-minute cooldown. You know, like I said, 4, 5, maybe even 6 minutes. Absolutely huge instant heal. It's kind of like a revival and a Divine Hymn combined. That's kind of how I like to think of it. At the end of the really short cast, you know, what is it, like a 1.5 second cast or something? Boom, big heal, like a revival, and then there's kind of a Trank or Divine Hymn effect added onto the end of it, because it applies a bunch of renews, a bunch of prayer mendings, and obviously the Holy Priest masteries, adding a hot on from the initial heal. Needs to be stood still for just the initial cast, but obviously the lasting effect is lasting past the initial cast, so it's not as bad as having to stand still and cast a Trank. And being stacked or spread, again, makes no difference. So that's the healing throughput cooldowns, but that's not all that there is in the game. It's not all about HPS, it's also about damage reduction cooldowns. Let's go through the damage reduction cooldowns. Aura Mastery, 3-minute cooldown, 20% damage reduction within 40 yards for 8 seconds. There's no stacking requirement at all, and it can obviously be used while moving. It's an instant cast, very strong cooldown. Barrier is kind of similar, 3-minute cooldown, slightly more damage reduction, 25% damage reduction within the barrier for 10 seconds. The last 2 seconds longer as well, but it obviously requires the raid to be in the barrier and not, you know, running all over the boss room. So barrier is kind of the stacked version of Aura Mastery, and because you're being stacked, they give you an extra 5% damage reduction. Spirit Link Totem, again 3 minutes, only 10% damage reduction, but the key with Spirit Link is obviously the health share. A lot of people actually don't even know about the damage reduction, they just think of it as the healing spread, but the damage reduction can be really important when assigning cooldowns, so don't forget about that. The health share is obviously just really good, can save people's lives. It does require the raid to be stacked, obviously, and you can't be running all over the place. Due to the Azerite trait Spouting Spirits, this also does a burst of healing usually, depending on how many traits you've got. If you have 3 of the Spouting Spirits traits, it actually does a really nice burst of healing when you place this. So a really versatile cooldown, Spirit Link Totem. Aegis of Light, the Prot Pally cooldown. Let's not forget about other, you know, non-healer cooldowns. Again, 3 minutes, 20% damage reduction behind them. Requires the raid to be stacked and not moving. Darkness, 3 minute again. 20% chance to avoid the damage events for 8 seconds. And requires to be stacked and not moving. Darkness is quite unique. There's not really many spells like it. When assigning cooldowns, I don't like to rely on Darkness on its own. I would never assign Darkness on a thing on its own to survive it, because you're just rolling the dice, and you never, when you're assigning cooldowns, you never want to be, you know, relying on luck or hoping not to get bad luck. You want something consistent that every time you pull the boss, it's going to help you live here. So Darkness is quite a dodgy one. I would never assign it on its own. I always pair it with something else as kind of a buffer to help out a bit. A good example of that is Zakul, where we have Dreads coming during the second phase, where people have a lot of dots, or I think it's technically the third phase. But when the Dreads come, everyone also has a high amount of the stacking dot, which means that putting a Darkness down is actually going to average out to do, you know, it's kind of reliable because it averages out to so many dot ticks that you know you're always going to get some value from it. So that's a good place to use Darkness there. With other things, we also use the Rally there usually. So that's, I just want to make that clear with Darkness. Never rely on it on its own to survive, you know, big hits. You really want to pair it with other things. You don't want to get screwed over by bad luck or rely on good luck. That's my point. Okay, and lastly, health increase cooldowns. That is Rallying Cry, 15% max health, 3-minute cooldown, 10 seconds. No stacking requirement there, obviously. It's an instant cast, no channel or anything. Ankh Totem, 5-minute cooldown, 10% increased health within 20 hours of the totem, or until a player dies within the totem. The safety net of being able to have a player Ankh if they die is really the key here, and what makes Ankh Totem so special. I think everyone knows that that's what makes Ankh Totem special, but again, don't forget about the 10% increased health. You can just use this as a raid-wide 10% increased health, which we actually do often on our Zakul farm. Again, Zakul, a boss that requires a lot of CDs. On Dreads, that 10% health is really nice, and we use it on one where we get into the last phase, and we may have some stacks left over on us still when the Dread comes, and that Ankh effect is really good safety net. You know, if we just leave someone a little bit too low and they actually die on that Dread, having that Ankh effect is a really good safety net. So now we know how the cooldowns are going to work. What we need to do is look at how we assign those cooldowns, and first step to that is looking at when we're taking damage, when we actually need to put the healing cooldowns. So Warcraft logs is really good for this. You can also use videos and just watch the videos and like look at the timestamps of when the boss is casting abilities and when things are happening. Warcraft logs is definitely the best way. So if I choose this Orgozoa Mythic here, obviously if you're still progressing a boss, you might not have a kill log. So you can either look at another guild who killed it and look at their timings, or if you're early progressing like we usually are, then what you need to do is just look up until you wiped on the log and take the timings from that. So like I said, let's look at this Orgozoa Mythic. The main thing with Orgozoa Mythic is the arcing light, right? Events is the best way to see it, so we go to events. And then you can see here, boss casting on 45, 115, 145, 220, and I think these are all going to be the same. I don't know why there's 3 of them, because there's like 3 different parts of it, I guess. So it doesn't really matter which one here you use. You can see they're all happening at the same time. Basically the boss does the initial cast, and then that does, after the initial cast, it will go on these other ones, which is attacking to the players. But you can just take this initial cast, this is perfect. So you can see here, it's happening around 42 seconds, 1 minute 12, etc, etc. What we can take from that is, you can obviously use a calculator and work it out, but you can see it's happening every 30 seconds. So let's say you're still progressing the fight, you might not have these ones down here, right? These last 3 or 4 rows, because you're still progressing. But the point is, you can look at these gaps, and you can already plan it out. So now let's see that now we know the timings, how that would look on a spreadsheet. So you can see here that we actually have multiple splits and the comp's always changing. So that's why I actually have 4 different cooldowns assigned here. Let's just look at the first one up here, top left. You see what I've done here is I've put in the zap timing. So as we took from the last one, 45, every 30 seconds apart, you see? 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds for those times. Now on this fight, obviously that's not the only time when there's damage. We know that on Orgozoa, from playing the fight, that there's also constant damage going on with the dot. So that means you can't just have cooldowns here on the zaps, you also need them in between. That, by the way, is obviously Arcane Current. So now that we know the timings, we've got it all mapped out like this, we need to add it onto here. So let's use this bottom right one here, okay? Let's delete this. Fresh timings here, and let's just pick a random heal comp, okay? So let's choose a Resto Druid, another Resto Druid, a Resto Shaman. Let's have one of everything, kind of, right? Let's have a Disc Priest, and let's have a Holy Paladin. So the best way to generally assign cooldowns is to work backwards, the furthest you've got in the fight. Obviously, I know we've killed the fight, we know all the timings at the end, but if you're still progressing, go to the hardest part of the fight you're at, and assign your most important cooldowns there, and then work backwards. So let's say, for argument's example, that on Zap 7, even though we don't really play as Zap 7 anymore because we have too much DPS, that this is where you wanted your strongest cooldowns, okay? This means that for this bit here, you want Wings up. And because Wings, as we know, is a 30-second cooldown, we can actually use the Wings earlier in this gap here, which will be around 330, and it will still be up here. So this is a good time here to assign some Wings, because it's going to cover this. What else is really important to have up the end? Avenge, okay? We want an Avenge covering this last zap. That's going to help us a lot, as well as a Devo. So maybe we put a Devo here, and we put an Avenge. And here you need to kind of do a bit of math. So because we've used Devo here at 3:45, it's a 3-minute cooldown. And this is what I mean by working backwards. You need to go back 3 minutes to 45 seconds. If you want to use that Devo again, the earliest you can use it is on the first zap. That's where you would put it. Avenge, again, you work backwards. If you know you need an Avenge here, because this is the hardest part of the fight for you, you need to work backwards, 1 minute 30. That would put you at 2:15. So we know we can also use that same Avenge here. and then we go back 130 again. That puts us at 45 seconds. So if we wanted to, in theory, we could advantage the first zap. Obviously, we know the first zap isn't that dangerous, so better to actually just not use an advantage there, and, you know, they can just hold the advantage all the way to here. It's fine. You don't need it this early. But now we know we've got it on the most important part and the hardest part before this that you can use it, which is Zap 4. So now we need to look at the other cooldowns. Oh yeah, wings here we also put. We need to backtrack on wings. This is 330. Obviously it's between 315 and 345, so 330 would be here. Wings is with vision, which everyone does play vision, is about 1 minute 30, okay? So again, we go back 1 minute 30 from 330, we put us at 2 minutes, which is here. So we know that here, we can have that same wings again. You see how it lines up? Then we work backwards here. If we're using it at 2 minutes, when's the earliest we can use wings? Before that, we go back 1 minute 30, 30 seconds. So that means we can actually use wings for the first zap, okay? So, you know, let's say I actually put it in here, we would put wings here. So that's how you do it. You put them where you need them the most, and you work backwards. And then once you've done that for all of them, which we'll get to, then we have to kind of juggle it around to make sure it all makes sense. You know, we're safe here now. We've got our wings in between here. Zap 6, we're going to need something. What haven't we used? A tide. So let's put healing tide there. Okay? There we go. Let's say for argument's sake that you also have a warrior in the raid and a demon hunter. One of each. We're going to put a tide here. That means that we can also tide on pool if we want to, except for they might be playing vision. And this is where it gets more complicated nowadays, because people may or not be playing vision. And that's kind of a call you need to make as the healing officer or with your team, whether you want to use a vision. Let's think, if we use a tide here, when could we use a vision on it, right? So if we use vision, it's 2 minutes 15-ish. That would mean we could use one at 1 minute, about here. So it makes sense that they actually play vision, and they can use one here. Now this little gap here is really safe. And by the way, this wings that I put at 30 seconds, obviously if there's no damage, here's the thing about wings, it can also be used as a DPS cooldown. It's okay to put wings where there's actually no healing required, just to get more wings in, because you can just use it for flat out DPS. And especially on a fight like Orgrizoa, having more DPS in the first phase is actually going to make the entire fight a lot easier, okay? Now we have a little gap here. This, in my opinion, is a good place for a darkness. And you could even do a darkness and a link. We haven't used the link yet from the shaman. Let's do a darkness and link at this 3 minute mark. They're both 3 minute cooldowns, so it means we're only going to use them once, but that's fine. They're going to go there. Then we go to the next place we need. We're all fine up until here. You see how we're working backwards? It's all about working backwards when you're assigning cooldowns. So Zap 5, 2 minutes 45. What haven't we used that we can put here? This could be a good place for a trank. So let's do trank. And if we wanted to, we could put a rally here as well, because this, like, bottom row here, these last 3 zaps, this is where the most damage is, right? So this is not a bad place to maybe put the rally. Let's put it there for now. Let's see how it works out. Again, rally a 3 minute cooldown. You're not going to get another one. That's probably okay. Let's see what else we have. Maybe we can fit something else in. We haven't used Ankh Totem. Maybe between Zap 4 and Zap 5, because this Zap's looking a little weak right now, right? It just has an advantage. It's all, like, advantage is good. It's okay. But we might be a little low afterwards, right? We might be a bit scared. So why not, as the Zap's coming, we place the Ankh Totem. We know that Ankh Totem lasts 30 seconds, right? It's a really long cooldown, which means if we place it on Zap 4, it's going to stay up all the way until Zap 5. So, a good place to use the Ankh Totem, like this. Ankh Totem's obviously a 5 minute cooldown. We can't use it again, right? We're only going to get one in this phase, and one in this fight, really. So, Ankh Totem's there. Zap 3 and Zap 2, we have nothing. We don't really have anything free. So this is when you kind of have to use your brain a bit and do a bit of ling around. You're probably going to have at least one Shadow Priest, right? So you're going to have 1 times Shadow Priest for Vampiric. Personally, this is the area that I use Vampirics in the main raid, because Vampiric is actually, you can talent it for 1 minute 30 cooldown, which is really good. So what you can do is, you can use a Vampiric, 145, and it's going to be up here, 1 minute 30 later, right here, which is really good. Now Zap 6 is also really safe. Like, if you look at these bottom 3 Zaps, they're all really safe. Trank Rally, Darkness Link in between, Hide and Embrace, Wings comes up, which is huge. You have Devo and Avenge on the last Zap. Like, you're really safe here. So where it's the hardest, this bottom row, which is piling on the CDs and working backwards. So Zap 3, Vampiric Embrace. Zap 2, I don't think we're really going to have anything there. What you could do is juggle the wings around a little bit. Like, we could move Tide here and then Tide here. The best thing to do would be just to put personals here. The very early Zaps, it's fine just to, you know, have nothing there. Oh, barrier. I completely forgot about barrier. My mind went completely blank. I was thinking we were missing something, And that's what it is. Okay, barrier. So what we can do instead, if we move wings back 30 seconds, that's completely fine. Because then wings just goes back to 0, 0. See how we're using it at 130 now? It's a 1 minute 30 cooldown. We still get an extra wings in on the pool for DPS. Perfect with bloodlust and stuff. That's great. Then we have this gap here. We can put the barrier here. Now, barrier is a cooldown that it scales with the amount of people in it, right? So the more people taking damage, the bigger barrier is. So ideally, we actually don't want to use a barrier here, but we need to see if there's actually anywhere else we can fit it in. Darkness and Link are the same. Link doesn't exactly scale with more people. It's actually fine to use it with less people. So what you could maybe do is swap this Link and barrier. Right, this change makes sense because barrier is 20 people are standing in it. It's actually doing 20 times as much as if just one person standing in it with the debuff. Link is not doing 20 times the use, like the damage reduction. Okay, it's doing 20 times the damage reduction, but the damage reduction is only 10%. The big part of Link is also the health sharing, which does more when less people have taken damage. I mean, you guys know how Link works, right? So if there's 5 people in Link that are low health and the rest are full health, it's going to do a lot bigger difference than if everyone's already low health. So that's why it makes sense that we swap the Link here. Okay to have nothing on this Zap too. Like I said, we can just put personals here. And that, I would say, is actually a really good healing cooldown setup for Orgrizoa. And you see how I just did this completely fresh? This is probably better than the setups I already had for a group that had these healers. Like I said, there's loads of different setups here for different comps, depending on what we take in each group. But for this healing setup, this is actually a very good, if you're playing a Zap 7. Usually in our groups, we're not playing a Zap 7 because we just have so much DPS, we face the boss around Zap 6. But I hope this has given you a really good example of how to assign your cities. This was just one boss. This was Orgrizoa, a really simple assigning method here. Start from the hardest part and work your way backwards. Take what the cooldowns are and put them backwards. You also obviously need to think, as I said earlier when I was explaining the raid cooldowns, how they need to be used. Can't use a barrier on a Zap because during Zaps you need to be spread. Okay? So obviously you can't just put a barrier on a Zap. Rank and Rally, you can be spread, it's fine. So you put them on a Zap. And then you put things like Darkness, Barrier, Link in between. And I hope like this really makes sense. It's quite intuitive. If you know how the cooldowns work, this makes a lot of sense. Ankh Totem is one of those where you need to be in the Ankh Totem to get the effect. But Ankh Totem is actually really large. It is an area you need to be in, but it is quite big. So it's okay to drop it on a Zap. And especially as the point of this was that it's actually carrying over into this gap here. You know, it's going to be down from Zap 4 to Zap 5, even when you're completely stacked again. So that's a fine place to use the Ankh Totem. I would love to hear questions. This is kind of a topic that I can debate with all day. You know, I'd love to help people with this kind of thing. Maybe if you have any suggestions, maybe you think I'm doing something wrong, I would love to hear, honestly, because it's always good to improve yourself. But I really think that for most people, they haven't quite got this concept of working backwards, and this should really help people with assigning their cooldowns in the raid. So I've been Chris Potter. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Hit the like button, hit subscribe. Let us know in the comments, like I said, any feedback you have. I hope people found this helpful. If you need any help looking up tooltips for the healing spells, a really good place to get all the information is on Wowhead. Actually really useful. Oftentimes when I'm looking for a spell for another class and I can't quite remember the exact, yards of it or the duration of it or something, Wowhead is where I'll check it out. So make sure you do that, guys. And yeah, bye guys.